as your consciousness expands and you go to higher levels, things become much more gratifying, much more full. We live, basically, our senses are expanded as well. So instead of smelling just sort of gross things, all our senses are refined, are expanded, and that in itself provides a completely new tapestry of experiences. Then is the cognitive aspect, which also expands. We can understand better, we can communicate better with people, and as we move out of the physical astral levels, a more physical astral level, I mentioned before that, for example, when you communicate with people, instead of just listening to them or talking, you communicate via thoughts. On a little bit of a higher level, not only do you have telepathic communication, but you actually participate in what the person sends you. For example, if they talk to you about a lovely holiday experience, rather than listening to what they say and receiving their thoughts, you suddenly find yourself in the surrounding, and that's another higher state of consciousness which allows you to perceive on a level which normal people wouldn't do. So the communication becomes much more intense, and our understanding of things becomes much more intense. Let me just work through this. There's another question. I've read spiritual teachers who say we always maintain our sense of separation and never fully merge with the source. This giving up the sense of a separate self seems to contradict this. Well, we are all individuals. We are separated from the world because we have built a sort of border around us, an identification, and we are separated from the world because the world is not in congruence with our identification. So what we have here on this lower level, we have built up certain beliefs. Okay, let's say we are in America, we may be a Democrat, and then the Republicans, we take instinctively a dislike to it, or vice versa, because our identity is based around our belief, and so we are separated from each other, and build barriers, and it's the beliefs which keep us apart. Now, as our consciousness expands, if we go into the territory which is beyond the mind, beyond the manifestation of our thoughts, our beliefs, and I've written in my book, Multidimensional Man and Experience, where I saw our beliefs from a higher dimensional level, and they are shapes. They are incredibly complex constructs which we can watch from the outside, and people who have these beliefs, they are sort of trapped and attached to these contracts, and they base their identity in there. And from a higher dimensional level, they pass along there like massive ships or incredibly complex thought forms, and you can see what they're made of, and the people trapped in them, they think that is the only world that exists. And when they come across other big constructions, they only relate it in terms of how they experience their little world. So there's continuously, people are trapped in their belief systems and they can't get past it. And that is a big challenge we face at the moment on this planet. There are so many beliefs that it's impossible to actually see our unity, So what I always suggest, people should first find out what connects them rather than what sets them apart, If we focus on that, what connects us, then of course we are very quickly create a cohesion in our society. And then the other things, and because a feeling of joy sort of enters into this process, we feel less inclined to vilify other people, you know. And so the whole problem at the moment is we are trapped in our beliefs, in our ideologies, you know, and this particular apparent at the moment, you know, in the world. So on the higher dimensional level, all these sort of things evaporate. So when I've read spiritual teachers who say we always maintain our sense of separation, never fully merge with the source. Well, merging with the source is basically expanding our consciousness to who we are, you know. I don't know, I never have experienced a process where I merged with the source, although I have had some, which I described in several of my books. I had the experience of unity consciousness. And unity consciousness is, it's basically a total homecoming, total merging with the absolute pure bliss state of who you are, the total clarity, the absolute being state, you know. But even then, you're still an individual, you're still you, and that never gets lost, you know. And I don't know how to describe that any other way, because I mean, I say, if we expand our awareness, we become more of who we are. We never become less. And that's a big thing. So people say you have to give up your individuality, or your separation. Yes, you give up your separation. You're no longer separated. There is no longer an outside world in the state of consciousness, because you suddenly transcend all this. But there's never a moment where you lose anything. So just to give you an example, for example, let's say you're in this state of consciousness, you see a flower. You pick the flower, and rather looking at it, smelling it, and seeing how beautiful it is, the moment you hold it and you connect to it, you become the flower in a sense. You feel what it is to be a flower. So the separation transcends, and you get a total experience of the outside world, and yet still maintain your individuality. And that's a really important thing which we have to bear in mind. So yeah, then the other question is, when you have this experience, is it difficult to readjust after this experience? Yes, it can be, because the first time I had the experience in 1972, I think it was, I had this overwhelming experience which came totally out of the blue while I was having coffee and eating a sandwich. I was stunned by this experience, and it totally, totally shook me, and I had no idea what was happening, and this was so overwhelming, the experience, that it changed my whole life, because from then on I never saw my life in the same way again. And it also left me with something which was, from then on I tried to, I've been meditating until then for about 3 years, and then my meditation started changing into one of appreciation, something more heart-based, because I wanted to get closer to this experience. And then, of course, what happened later is I had a guide came out of the experience, and I refer to it as my silent companion, and that which I identified as a higher aspect of myself, or let's say my higher self. But it took me 40 years to actually totally merge with this entity which was my silent companion. And it was also my teacher, you know. So it does change. It does change your life, and you'll probably never be the same. For example, if you talk to people who had near-death experiences, very often if they're not prepared for it, it can really unsettle them and disturb them. And I belong to a group which was specifically created by psychologists to deal with people who had these spiritual experiences, you know, and they didn't know what happened or had near-death experience, and they couldn't deal with it. Some people went to the doctor to try to get medication to make them feel normal again after that, you know. So this group was established to make people, to reassure people there is a normal, natural psychological process, and they have to readjust and integrate the experience. And that is the most difficult thing, to integrate the experience, and it can take a lifetime, like it does in my case. I'm still integrating the experience into my life and try to bring it into my life as best as I can, you know, which is not very easy. Okay, there's another interesting question. Why do spirits leave these realms to have earthly experiences? This is really interesting. Some people who are in these states of consciousness, they don't want to remain there. They want to go back to Earth, and they want to have an earthly experience. And the reason behind it is the incredible compassion that has been released, the love. And I had an experience which I think I'm going to, if I'm going to write another book, that is going to be one of the key subjects, because I went to Greece, and I met a saint who had died 1700 years ago in one of these chapels. And I had this connection, I built this connection after I saw the icon, and the monk sort of introduced me via this icon to the spiritual presence. And it was really interesting, because this saint, her name was Anastasia, she sort of became like my silent companion for 6 months afterwards. And whenever I thought of her, I felt her presence, you know. So in my meditation, I talked to her, you know. And then I finally said to her, okay, show me your home. And I imagined to be something like what you see behind me, a beautiful scenery, a heavenly realm. And instead of that, she took me into a slum of abject poverty and really dark place. And I was totally shocked, you know, when I had the experience of it. And I said, this can't be, you know. And she said, well, my home is where I'm needed most. And that was the answer I received from her. And of course, there are these people, they are in Buddhist teaching, they are called bodhisattvas. They cannot bear the idea of being happy while other people are still miserable and suffering. So they are coming back into this plane and mingle with us and try not to be noticed, but doing things which are of incredible value, you know. And sometimes they may not even be aware of it. They may not even know about their true background. They just do their job. And this is why people come down here, because they feel they're just not at the right place, exploring all these wonders of the higher dimensional levels, when there are other people who need a lot of help. So I just thought I'd make this point.